Let's talk TCPA. That's the Telephone Consumer Protection Act. The changes that you need to know about for 2025 and how it will really impact the real estate industry, as well as how to approach privacy to make you stand out from the competition. We're about to talk to Jodi Daniels. Jodi is the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a leading data privacy consulting firm. She has over 25 years of experience in privacy compliance, digital marketing, and strategy, and is a nationally recognized authority on consumer privacy. Jodi is also the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and Amazon best-selling author of the book Data Reimagined: Building Trust One Bite at a Time. Beyond the many large corporations and fast-growing companies and teams that she has helped, she's also the co-host of a popular podcast called She Said Privacy, He Said Security, and someone that has not just a passion for making privacy simpler for businesses of all sizes, but seeking to help you understand how to use privacy as a benefit to your business. When you listen in to our full conversation, you're going to walk away with clarity on what the TCPA changes are. You're going to understand the specifics that go into effect in January in 2025. You're going to understand the compliance actions, those steps you need to take to make sure that you're adhering to the rules and avoiding penalties. You're going to understand the why. You're going to learn what was behind these TCPA changes, why they were implemented, so that you can explain them to your peers and anybody on your marketing team to make sure you're not getting any penalties. We're going to help correct some misconceptions. We're going to help you address the common misinformation about TCPA that's out there. And we're going to give you some resources for support, ongoing advice as things continue to change, new tools, as well as we're going to give you a little bit of insight into what the Easy Home Search team has just rolled out to help you make this even easier. We're about to hop over and have a conversation with Jodi. Let's start though with at a super high level. What are the TCPA changes? What's coming, especially in January and April of 2025?
Well, thank you so much for having me today. The big change is that today, people basically could opt in and then a company could share that behind the scenes with multiple people. I, the person who opted in, really don't know who it was going to. And now I get all kinds of marketing messages. The change going forward is I, the person opting in, actually have to select. It gets to go to person A, person B, or company A, company B, company C. It's really explicit which company gets to receive my data. So I'll pause there. There's lots behind the scenes, but that's going to be the really big change. It's a one for one versus kind of a one for many.
Okay. Well, that fits in very well. I mean, I mentioned in the intro, but it's like you're the privacy expert that I know. I mean, this is what you do day in and day out, is help companies big and small go through privacy. And so this very much seems like TCPA falls into privacy and confidentiality and all. So like, what's behind the changes? Like, why were these put in place? What did the government regulators, what are they trying to solve?
Well, there's a modern push for privacy these days. It's in the news for a variety of reasons. And at the base of really any privacy law is around notice, disclosure, transparency, and then choice. Those are really the basics. So before, if I opted into something and then it was sent to whomever, there's very little transparency there. And like many laws that we have today, companies misused that information and pushed the envelope a bit too far, which meant regulators were now trying to close essentially a loophole where, yes, I might have opted in, here's my information. I didn't really know it was going to be shared with, could potentially be thousands of people behind the scenes. And then what continued to happen, and almost imagine that daisy chain. If anyone's listening and ever wondered, how did you get that mailer of something that was either really accurate or so off track? How did you get that? Well, it was sold multiple times. Now, where we are is that level of transparency. I, the person, get to decide who my information is actually going to go to. And then we're going to talk about the choice of what that means. Can I revoke that consent? But at the basics, it's disclosure and it's transparency and it's accountability. Some really basic concepts in privacy.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I've always taken the approach from a marketing perspective, and we do this at Easy Home Search, where for me, I kind of take the approach that letting the consumer know what's happening with their data is actually a beneficial thing from a marketing and value perspective. I mean, like DuckDuckGo or Brave from a browser perspective, WhatsApp, or some of the others that like Apple. Apple has taken a really strict place about where they view for consumer privacy in a lot of ways. And I feel like it should be helpful to a consumer to know, hey, when you sign up, this is what I'm going to do with your data and what not being done with your data. but there's been a lot of bad actors, and it feels like everybody's getting handcuffs put on them because some people have gone very extreme with what they can do that.
Well, they have. And if you think about even outside the privacy universe, why do we all have rules and laws? This goes back to kindergarten, right? Someone got up and now everyone has to raise their hand, or someone got up too many times and now you have to have a hall pass, right? All the laws and rules are because someone pushed it too far. And the same is true here in privacy. And I love, Kurt, what you said about how you think it's helpful to be really honest, because for me, as a marketer, people are trying to make a connection. You're trying to connect someone with a brand, with a mission, with an opportunity. And the people who feel like their data wasn't misused are going to be more likely to even give you more data. So you're going to be more accurate. You'll have better targeting. That's really what this is. Another angle, kind of the pro side of what this is going to make marketers do is realize, no, I'm going to have to make sure that they can trust me. And at the heart of privacy is actually all around trust.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to ask you just a minute specifically then how this applies to real estate professionals. For years now, I've coached at this point tens of thousands of real estate agents, and one of the examples that I always give to them is they're like, well, like, what should I do in marketing? And I was like, you should find the fee-based financial advisors in your area and just copy them. Because I'm like, to me, if somebody is searching for a home, if you're searching for a $500,000 home, well, why is that information so valuable? Well, it's because whatever site you're searching on knows your budget. Are you buying a $500,000 home or a $1 million home? They know your contact info. They know your cell phone. And I'm like, would you ever go on to a random website and say, hey, I have a $2 million or $1 million 401k or IRA, and I'm going to move it in the next 3 months. And here's my phone number and email. No, because like you're going to make a wise decision and you know what people would do with that data. But in real estate, that's exactly what you do when you say, hey, I have $1 million house and I'm going to sell it. And I'm looking at these other houses and it's really clear. Am I kind of just infotainment shopping, or am I really doing tight searches, which means I'm probably going to make a decision the next 90 days or so. And like nobody realizes that as a consumer, but I think they're starting to realize it. So
it's an incredibly important point, because I remember I worked at a bank of years ago, and some of the conversations that we would have would be around the kind of advertising, because as you would be searching for things, you very well could indicate the type of home or the type of loan, or what your income level is. And the bank very much didn't want to insinuate in any direction. So significant thought went into what could that ad be, because that the search and the information behind that is incredibly important and valuable. And they really prided themselves on privacy and didn't want to make that misstep with a customer. The same is true here in that marketing activity. When you're doing that search, it's important to be able to make that connection and not be that creepy factor. You want to make a reasonable marketing message to the end person that makes them feel connected and not stalked.
Yeah, I think in real estate, kids, anything like that, there's so much data and there's so much personal things behind it. I mean, it may even be a spouse or partner that hasn't started discussing with their spouse yet that they're wanting to move, but they're doing that research up front. And so that's why I like being much more upfront. And I see so many agents do this well and do it not so well either, too, because of marketing. When you sign up, I can get your husband's information a lot of times from other sources. And it's like, well, it seems like, especially within real estate, but everywhere, the rules are changing. So if you sign up, you have to give me consent before I can give you a call. But what does that look like specifically for real estate agents? I mean, compared to what they have done in the past, it's both the one-to-one consent, but what else do they actually have to do? What should they be concerned about?
Well, one of the other pieces I think that's really important to understand about TCPA and consent, which is really different than things like email marketing or even postal marketing. And that's because the origin goes back to a call being invasive. How many telemarketers would call at a dinner time or really early in the morning or really late at night? That's why they had to put parameters, because it was a really loud ringing device in your home. A loud ringing device doesn't happen in an email, and it doesn't happen in your mailbox. It just might get flooded with paper that hopefully you put in the recycle bin if you didn't want it. The same was true from a texting standpoint, because each message, it might be hard to believe to those listening, but you actually had to pay for that text message. Why should I have to pay for that message that I didn't ever ask for. Typically, you never paid for email marketing, and you certainly didn't pay for however much mail you received. I think that's a really important piece to the TCPA story, is understanding why phone and text are different. So in the one-to-one consent, it's about written consent. Now, in the digital universe, written consent is that ability to have that checkbox. That checkbox cannot be what we call pre-checked. So if you've ever gone shopping and you notice that there might be a little box that says, would you like to buy the insurance? Or would you like to sign up for this marketing? Or would you like to have this add-on? Or you could keep going, right? Because they have a whole long list of add-ons, and sometimes they are pre-checked and you have to go and uncheck them all. No. In consent, it has to be an open box. It has to be explicit what I'm opting in for. And then I have to have a big button that says submit, enter, I accept, something that is really clear to the person of what it is that they're signing up for. Now, this one-to-one consent means if you are going to collect my information and share it with multiple people, you literally have to state the multiple people. Company A, company B, company C. Now, if you have hundreds of companies, that's going to be pretty tricky to do. Hopefully, maybe those listening don't have hundreds of companies. That's going to be for the lead generators. But for the average kind of real estate, team here, if it is just you receiving that information, then it needs to be clear it's you receiving that information. It won't be shared to other people. If it's going to be to maybe you partner with two others, then you list out each of them so that I, the user, get to decide I want person one or company one and company three. I didn't really like the name of company two, so I ignored them.
Okay. So if I'm a real estate agent that has a website, I may be having a platform that builds my website for me, or I may have my own WordPress site that, had a marketer that's in there. For those consents, if I'm a real estate agent working with, say, a loan officer, I need to have a checkbox so that I can call the person. Do I need to have a checkbox as well for I'm going to share this with this loan officer? Are you okay with that?
Absolutely. Yes, because what you're doing with the information is for you. And then I might be okay with you. I'm really interested in you. I love you, real estate agent. I want to know all about your listings. I didn't say I also want loan information. I already have my best friend over here. I don't need that. So I don't want that information. That has to be an explicit box. Maybe you like to have a group of 3 loan officers and, evenly divide your referrals. And so you might list loan officer 1, 2, and 3. And I get to say, you know what, 3 would be great. I really want competitive bids. So I pick all 3. Maybe I just pick 2, or maybe I just pick 1 or none. I get to make the decision. The idea of transparency and choice goes to me. And so I have to have unchecked boxes for each one of those. And then the system needs to be able to store that consent. So the really important piece is the burden of proof is on the company asking for consent. So if you have a tool, that's going to be one of the important pieces to look for in a tool. Can you see all the consent? Where does the logs go? And then if you buy information from someone, so maybe you're buying leads from somebody else, you need to make sure you can see where the consent was received, because the burden is on you, the advertiser, the real estate professional here, to be using that information.
Okay. So I assume that works the same way in, like, from a partner perspective. So if I'm the loan officer that typically works with you as the agent and these hand over leads, I can still get that lead, but I want to make sure that I'm covered. If I'm going to be calling, I need to make sure that somehow I have verification that that they opted in on your site, that you could share the information with me as well.
So what a lot of the larger lead generation companies are building are those log files, so that, again, that concept of transparency, because they're in the business of selling information, but each recipient needs to be able to show that consent. So for someone here in just a real estate agent to loan officer, the loan officer who receives that information needs to be able to say, okay, Jodi, you opted in on Thursday at 10 o'clock. Great. And Kurt, you opted in on Friday at 2 o'clock, and so on and so forth. The burden is always on the person doing the advertising.
Okay. So that's on the opt-in for consent. What else does do the new regulations require they do? Like, do not call, and how long does this last?
Yeah. So before, from a perspective, it was kind of a 30-day window where you'd be able to revoke consent and put me on a list. And I had around 30 days to be able to do that. We're moving now to a 10-day approach. So the window has shortened for how long I'm going to, as a company, be able to remove me from those different lists. And the important thing about removing me, so withdrawal of consent, is it's a reasonable language. People are on text, for example, used to stop and quit, opt out, any of those words where it would be reasonable that the person is asking to stop, then the company has to listen. So it's not only here's 7 words and these are the only 7 you have to listen to. It's kind of in context. Now, I think most people are going to use stop and opt out, no more, cease, like something like that. But it's reasonable, natural language that someone would do. And those of you listening can't see my little air quotes going on here, but it is reasonable in my little rabbit air quotes.
Okay. So we've gone through what's changing is now it's one-to-one consent. I have to opt in. I can opt out. And it sounds like, within like kind of 10 days ish, they need to remove me from that. Besides just somebody opting in, I've heard there's things where as well, and there's a lot of misinformation, which is why I'm asking some of these questions about like the do not call listed right now. So somebody opts in on my website in January. Can I still call them in August?
Yeah. So if I am on the do not call list, I am on the do not call list. And the only time you can ever call me is if I have explicitly opted in to your marketing. So if I am on a do not call list and I have not explicitly opted in, and as a friendly reminder, in case you just joined now, explicit opt in is a little open box that was not pre-checked. And I said, yes, please call me. And I have never asked to be opted out, then you could call me. Otherwise, if I am on a do not call list, you cannot call me ever until I opt in explicitly to you. That and actually I want to clarify something. So the regular opting out, everything around revoking consent, moved from 30 days to 10 days. The do not call list is pretty much a once a month activity. So that is remaining the 31 days. So any kind of opt out, you have to honor me within 10 days. But the do not call list, you're required to update that at least once a month. So in your example of January, that would be 8 months. Really should have updated me by then. So you cannot call me in August unless you have updated me and I've magically been dropped from the do not call list, which is very unlikely to actually have ever happened. So if I am on do not call, people, do not call. Do not call. There are, aside from regular fines from the regulators, there are no shortage of plaintiffs' firms that have nothing else to do but to find violators. This is their full-time job, is to find people who are doing this wrong, and they know people are doing it wrong. And that is how they will come after you with some type of demand letter and settlement. And instead, I'd much rather see everyone use all of that settlement money on amazing marketing practices that will actually be compliant and bring you new business. So do not call, do not text unless you have the appropriate consent.
Now is that a new change, or is it just it seems like everybody, at least in real estate, is talking about this right now, is like that once a month you need to be running your CRM through or past the do not call list. Is that something new through the change of TCPA, or is that something that should have been in place and most people just weren't doing?
The latter. It should have been in place and most people weren't doing. Your kind of sophisticated call practicing companies have been doing this forever. There are a plethora of do not call list companies out there that will help you manage this with different tools and different software. The do not call list has been around for a really long time. It's really just a friendly reminder of what is happening. It's one-to-one consent and the ability to revoke in a shorter time period that are really the big changes.
I mean, we've heard enough of it coming around. We've launched another product and company called easyverify.ai just to make it a simple, almost one click for the agents to connect your CRM, and we'll run it through once a month, past the do not call list for you, and then feed that flag back to their CRM. So it's in Follow Up Boss, and they shouldn't have any questions at this point.
And that's a great solution because that's a perfect example of here is technology helping you do what you need to be doing from a compliance point of view. Jodi, can go on that do not call list at any time. It's a national list, and you need to be able to know that I'm on that national list.
Makes sense. Well, with that, like asking, like, so this was something that was with the do not call list that should have been in place. People are becoming aware of it right now, which is good because there are fines and it sounds like companies going after for settlements with demand letters and whatnot. Are there other myths out there though about TCPA? Either that people didn't realize they needed to do things, or they didn't need to do things before, or things that you're hearing not just in real estate but other industries. People are saying one thing that's just not true.
There's been a variety of different lawsuits around TCPA, and there were a couple settlements a couple years ago where I think people thought it was maybe a gray zone of being opt-in. And most privacy attorneys I have talked to have never told companies to change their opt-in practices. And for me, this is two pieces. You have just a law where it is opt-in. So what was explicit written consent has always kind of been the question mark. It's not a question mark now with this one-to-one consent. It is really clear what it is that they're asking for. And it is very much aimed at trying to get the user, the person opting in, to be really clear where their data is going, to give them control around their data. And can I opt out? Because you know what? I've decided I don't want you to have my data anymore, and I need to be able to revoke that consent. So control is at what's at play in these changes, and to kind of close this open loophole of my data going to whomever and I don't know where. At the same time, there's fines. There's always fines to make people pay attention to laws here in the US. And like I said, in addition to the fines are these plaintiffs' firms. And this is something that people really do need to be aware of. This is a practice that anyone can see. Anyone can go to the website and see what my opt-in consent is looking like. Are you at a trade show collecting phone numbers? There's a few of those. Probably not where the majority of your leads are going to come from these days. The majority are going to come online, which means anyone can come and test what your practices are. So if I were to say the biggest myth has kind of been around, do I really need opt-in consent? And what is that opt-in consent? What does that look like? Now, the one thing I think that's incredibly important is these laws are around this idea of auto dialers and robocalls, which means any kind of system. And this is where a lot of the settlements have been. What is a system? What's been deemed a system to be able to go out and call people? If you're the agent and I'm the customer, and you just want to send me a message that says, hey, Jodi, I got this new listing over here. And it's you old fashioned, like typing out each individual person. That is a one-to-one text just on a phone. That's not using an auto dialer in that capacity. That's not what we're speaking about. It's the mass marketing activities that we're talking about. So I do want people to understand you can still communicate with someone one-to-one, but if it starts crossing the line in marketing messages and using auto dialers, that's where it gets a little messy. I would not encourage a real estate agent or loan officer listening to take my phone and continuously send marketing messages one-to-one manually and think that will be okay. Someone will come along and question that. But technically the law is around robocalls and auto dialers. So kind of a really technical piece. But remember, if you spam me, what's going to happen? Am I going to be happy with you? No, I'm going to be really mad at you. And you're going to go, well, I'm on a technicality. And I'm just going to be the annoyed customer and I want nothing to do with you.
Let me repeat that back to you as you're the expert. So if I'm an agent, and there's some agents that they're really good at cold calling or texting. So if I manually sit there and pound out 1,000 text messages to 1,000 individuals one at a time, I could do that, but it's also highly likely that might end up getting somebody or a variety of people to come up on the other side and question, are you using software? Are you using robo-dialers or automatic things? And so while it's technically okay, I might still get in trouble and then have to spend both resources and time and having a lawyer to try to defend and saying, no, this was me manually doing it.
That's right. And then I think the other piece you have to remember is there's technicalities and then there's reality. And the person you're calling If you keep calling them multiple times or sending multiple messages, I, the end user, don't know the difference. I put myself on a do not call list, and here you are calling me. That doesn't make sense to me, the end user. Or I don't want all these text messages, like stop. So that is an important piece. You have to think of the customer first. I appreciate that everyone wants to sell homes and their financial services in what we're talking about here today. Everyone is trying to market, pick me, pick me. However, in doing so, you're trying to build a relationship. And if you start that relationship with annoyance, that's not going to work out really well for you. It is about building something that's authentic and transparent. And Kurt, you mentioned earlier about the size of the purchase. These are big purchases that we have. Being able to trust the person is incredibly important. This is an emotional purchase. This is not, I'm shopping for a sink or a roof or a blanket. Like, this is a big, big deal. I need to know that this person actually cares about me and wants to be with me every step of this very complicated process. And to the customer, potentially spamming them, even if it would be okay, is not going to be good from your relationship and marketing perspective and your compliance perspective. And there also might even be rules within your brokerage or agency. So they might just say, absolutely, for any message or phone call that you're sending, it must be this way, because that's going to be their rules. And it's a good rule. And part of that rule is for why I just described it.
I like that. I'm going to ask you in just a minute about how this fits in with the why for some of the broader privacy trends. But like what you mentioned about like building the relationship, that's where it's like we do a lot of coaching for agents and teams about how to have productive phone calls and things that we don't even realize that a lot of times we will say when we're talking to somebody who's filled out something on our website or even a friend, where it shuts down the relationship. And sometimes it is acknowledging that change of mind. And so like when somebody fills out a form on an agent's website, and you call, well, you may be having a good day, but asking that person, are you having a good day? Well, no, they may not be having a good day. They may be looking at buying or selling a property because they've just been thrust into elder care. And so maybe it's the worst day, or it's a divorce situation that's going on. And so it's like, you may be having good intentions by starting that relationship by saying, hey, Jodi, are you having a great day? How can I help you? But that could actually be a relationship killer at that point versus how do you step into that relationship in a way that won't necessarily put up a block towards what both would be helpful to the client and what you're trying to accomplish?
That's such an important perspective. And it really translates to what we're talking about here, because they've given you information. And the whole point of this law that we're talking about is, again, back to control. I want to be able to control. It goes to just the first person. You know what? I'm okay with 3 people. I'm okay with 10 people. I'm okay with 100 people. People are going to have different comfortable levels with where their information is, and they want to be able to control it. And the relationships that we're talking, now this applies to any industry, this law, it's not industry specific. In this specific case, that relationship is so important. It might be a life stage event that this agent or loan officer is going to be working with that person through. And they really need someone that they feel like it's not just a transaction, right? That it's experience. I mean, think about all the marketing messages. Why pick one over the other? How does that translate into your communication? And in some cases, that's the very first impression that they have.
Okay, that makes sense. Beyond just the starting that relationship and that broader piece, I mean, how does this fit into the broader privacy trends that's what you do day in and day out to step in. So it's both like there's the regulations, but like what's been the change of privacy trends over the years, and how does this kind of fit in?
Well, the trend is very much to notice transparency and choice. Really what I kind of described at the beginning, because many people are going to have contact information on their site. Some of you might even have advertising, maybe you have a meta pixel on your site or other social media or Google Analytics and things like that. And so buried in all those terms, you actually agreed to making sure you have the right disclosure and opt-outs in a privacy policy. Please don't just copy the privacy policy from the agent that you think is doing a great job, because they might not know anything about privacy. They might just be really awesome at selling homes. So it's really important to be able to disclose what you're actually doing. The trend is about having an accurate privacy notice. The trend is about thinking about the kind of data you're collecting and what you're doing with it. If I ask you a long list of questions, the kind of home, the level home that you're looking at buying, you might be telling me very personal information, my financial information, and I'm trusting you with that. So what are you going to do with it? One of the themes is having a purpose. Collect what you need, not what you want. Just collect the only pieces that you actually need to do business with me. And then there's always this idea of protection, security. So really do make sure it is properly secured. Hackers don't discriminate, and they love going after small people who they know might not have great security. So also have really good security. And then the other is choice, being able to say, you know what? I actually don't really want your marketing messages. I'm willing to work with you one-on-one. Or to be able to say, you know what? I don't really like this experience. I don't want any more marketing from you at all, and being able to revoke that information. Notice minimization, meaning only collect what you really need, and choice. Those are the big themes that are happening globally, and especially here in the US.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like, 10 years, 15 years ago, a lot of the consent rules around privacy and whatnot, you could handle manually, but now with all of the states that have come out with things with federal regulations, it's like there's no way to stay accurate with everything by just trying to handle everything manual. I have to have tools in place and systems that will automatically pull people's information, flag stuff. Because especially from a small business, which is most real estate agents, they have so many different tools in their real estate stack, or they're using Zapier that's sending a one-way connection over somewhere else to 17 different tools. Well, when somebody revoked consent, somehow that information needs to flow through to all those tools as well. And most people don't have the technology set up nowadays to do that, or they've hired a couple of people off of Fiverr or Upwork to connect all these systems, and none of them really talk to each other.
Yeah, it's a very important piece that they all need to talk to each other. And I always say put the customer first, but then also put yourself in that position. So imagine when you've contacted a company and want to be able to say, you know what, I don't want your marketing anymore. And then you still get it, or you're kind of frustrated, right? So think about, okay, what would a larger company need to do? Gosh, they probably have all these different systems that they have to get me out of. Well, the same is going to be true for you. Do you do direct mail? Do you have multiple different marketing methods that you have? What would it take to unwind? And actually, anytime we work with companies and we say, if you want to collect this data and you're going to store it in this particular system, how can you unwind it? If Jodi says, I don't want that anymore, what would you need to do? And then that would get built in. So as you were just describing, you might have a one-way connection there. Well, you're going to have to think about the one-way connection back to be able to say, nope, no more.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the why behind so many of these, both the handcuffs we've been given, but also does come down to it is what's best for the relationship. And so, I mean, for years, we've had things as marketers like full contact, where I can take an email address when I collect it and I can run it against, and in many cases, get a 60 to 80% hit rate to find your Pinterest account, your LinkedIn account, your Twitter account, if you have one. And it's like, well, that's great. And can that information be useful if your Pinterest account is public, to be able to see what you're pinning and what you're posting about? Yes, but if you've simply filled out a form and I call you and start talking about, oh, I see you're looking for, houses with pink walls and, this, that, and the other, that seems creepy. You wouldn't want that to happen to you. Now, that could be valuable information that you use to spark the conversation, but it's all about how do you have that relationship in a way that doesn't both seem creepy, but is also exactly, in my mind, it's exactly what the consumer intended to happen. When I filled out something on your website, I knew likely that you were going to call. In this case, there's a checkbox that says you can call. If not, you might be able to email, but you can't call me.
100%. I've given you a hint. I want to connect with you. I didn't say, please go scour the web and learn everything about me. Just what I always say, especially in privacy, is just because you can doesn't mean you should. And it's very important to put the mind of the customer first and being able to build that relationship. It's a process. You don't just share everything the first time you meet them. You have to work your way to building the idea of trust. And from a marketing standpoint, again, we're trying to say, why should you pick me? Why should I be the agent or the financial services person for you? Why? Well, because I have this experience. I work with this demographic. I work in this location. This is how I negotiate for you. I sell in a particular way or help you buy in a short period of time, right? You're listing all the features that make you amazing. We don't want a data collection piece where it feels like you've invaded this very emotional, personal space to impact all the great pieces that you've done. Just like how you described, well, how do you start the conversation? Maybe I'm in this situation and have to buy or sell because of a life event that it makes me upset. So I might not really be happy about the situation. And maybe I want the agent who's going to make it as quick and painless as possible. Well, I really don't want you sharing all my personal information. I just want to be quiet and a little bit more reserved. Pull out the relationship and the pieces will naturally come. And then you can do your magic as the person has disclosed that information. So I always think there's laws and there's rules, just like there's laws and rules and what you can do in your contract and how quickly everything has to sell. And all those steps are there for a very particular reason, whether we like them or not. In the privacy side, they're also here for a reason, and it's to protect the person. And just imagine yourself in that scenario. What would make you feel comfortable in working with somebody?
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I mentioned the kind of the shortcut I give a lot of the agents as I've coached, and sometimes in very large rooms and sometimes one-on-one or teams, is if you want the shortcut to how you grow as a real estate agent or loan officer, go find that fee-based financial advisor that's just killing it in your local market and just copy what they're doing. And the reason for that is like, I have no idea how many people I have referred. I mean, hundreds at this point to my financial advisor. Well, because he's a fee-based financial advisor with a firm that only does that. And so it's like, do I always take their advice when he does an investment? Well, no, because he's an advisor. He doesn't dictate things, but I know that he's not getting a kickback on the backside. When I go to him and say, hey, I need an accountant for my S Corp, when I need a lawyer for this, I know that he's not getting a referral fee back on the other side. And a lot of times he goes, hey, I don't have somebody for you for this, or I have an accountant that I like, but here's why I don't think you should use them. Because there's implicit trust there, because I know like in their charter, they can't be taking fees on the other side. Because of that, I refer so many people to him. And I've sent people to him saying like, I don't have an accountant for you, but can you go ask Dan? Dan would probably know somebody, and he's happy to do that. And so I think the number of referrals that good fee-based financial advisors have gotten, that's what being upfront can look like with what am I doing with your information.
100% agree. I think that's a great parallel.
Besides that, there's so many things that, like I said, there's so much information happening out there. Listeners, they're hearing a lot of myths in Real Closers and all these other Facebook groups for real estate agents. There's so much different things that are being shared. If agents and loan officers want to get accurate, updated information, where would you suggest that they get that?
Well, there's no shortage of law firms that love to be able to summarize this information. So quite honestly, pick your favorite law firm and you can follow their content, their blogs, their webinars, kind of dependent on where you are in the market. There really are so many options. You know, the TCPA, you can look at the FCC guidance and the FTC guidance. There's actually quite a lot that is out there. If you really like privacy, you can also go to the Privacy Association. Now, if you do that, just know you're going to get a long list of other privacy things. But the Privacy Association, which is IAPP, also has some information that is out there. But my first step would probably be for your local market and where you are, and identify a particular law firm that you feel comfortable with. And maybe it's already the law firm that your brokerage is using that can put out this type of content.
Yeah, I like that. I definitely like the local aspect there, because while TCPA is a national thing, there's so many privacy rules that are coming out at a state level. If they don't have an avenue to know what's going on, they have no idea that their state legislature passed something 2 or 3 years ago that may be going into effect next year.
That's 100%. And it also just depends, I think, a little bit on the brokerage. So some of the brokerages are going to have a compliance function more than others, and they themselves might be putting out. So if you're listening and you have never, and you're part of one of the larger brokerages and you haven't paid attention to any of the compliance alerts that I know that they are putting out, now is a really great time to go and do that, because they are spending quite a good amount of time making sure that they have materials for their agents to be able to be familiar with.
Okay. Well, I think kind of one last question is, I mean, you do privacy all the time. We know there's a lot more regulations that are coming in place. I would assume you don't see regulations for around privacy and consent going away. What does this look like for the future, not just in real estate marketing, but marketers or sales in general?
So it's definitely not going away, especially, I mean, we have TCPA at that federal level for these auto dialing and text messages. In the email universe here in the US, there's a few places where it might be moving to consent, very, very specific sensitive data fields. But otherwise, we're still in a very much notice and choice, kind of notice and opt out philosophy. The theme of all the privacy laws is to know your data. For anyone listening, if you have a web of stack and you're not really sure what data you have in it, or it's been a little while since you've done a cleanup, now's a really great time to get started. You do not necessarily need all the data that you have in there. Some of that data might be old. So if you haven't run it through any filters to make sure that you're getting rid of bounced emails and old data, good time to start. But to really only collect what you need and only use what the customer is going to expect of you. So know your data is my number one piece. Then have an accurate privacy notice and be able to make sure that your stack can manage anyone who opts out. And remember, if someone opts out, that is a signal that they're not wanting to work with you. Something has gone wrong, and instead you need to focus on different people.
Okay. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Jodi, for sharing your expertise today, joining us. And there's a lot of changes with TCPA that they're critical for not just real estate professionals, but everyone. So I think you've given us a clear path forward on that. To our listeners and those that we're going to share this out with, if you have more questions, need support, you can find Jodi at redcloveradvisors.com. And as always, stay tuned and stay on our newsletter. Keep giving us consent if you want to keep hearing more of this. And until next time, stay compliant and focus on building trust with your clients. It is about the relationship.